Welcome to the Fatter Wallet Show. Because stewardship isn't about being broke. On this show, we read the books, break down the ideas, and articulate the best thinking on money, investing, entrepreneurship, productivity, financial strategy, and wealth creation. Every episode is designed to help you stop guessing, start growing, and build a life of freedom, purpose, and stewardship. And if you're tired of feeling stuck financially, this is exactly where you need to be, because at Fatter Wallets, we don't just talk about money, we teach you how to master it. Before we jump in, I want to invite you to grab the free courses available at fatterwallets.com. They are completely free. Inside, you'll discover courses like how to pay off your mortgage in 3 to 7 years using the velocity banking strategy. This method shows you step-by-step how to restructure your debt, use cash flow as a weapon, and eliminate loans in record time without earning more money and without working extra hours. Also learn how to turn the stocks you already own into weekly income using covered calls. You'll discover how to rent out your shares, generate consistent premium income, and dramatically increase your ROI with our beginner-friendly options trading course. All of this is 100% free because we believe financial wisdom should empower people, not lock them behind a paywall. So if you're ready to think bigger, live wiser, and grow a fatter wallet God's way, you're in the right place. All right, let's get into today's discussion. We are looking at the writing, Predictably Irrational. So we're jumping into a topic that really challenges the very bedrock of classical finance and economic strategy.
It really does.
For, centuries, the entire foundation of how we model markets, how policy is made, even how we design our personal investment strategies, it all rests on this one core principle.
It's that we're irrational.
That you, the individual, are a rational actor. That when you're faced with a choice, especially about money, the traditional view is that you're calculating, you're optimizing.
You're always making the best possible choice for yourself.
Exactly. And so that is our mission today, to explore the powerful evidence suggesting that this elegant mathematical theory is fundamentally flawed.
I'd say it's more than just flawed. It can be dangerous when you rely on it exclusively. I mean, this whole idea of homo economicus, the perfectly rational man, it's a great concept for a textbook.
Sure. It's clean.
It's clean, but it just doesn't describe actual human behavior. The exploration we're undertaking today shows that the mistakes we make, they aren't just random, isolated screw-ups. They're systematic, they are repetitive. And this is the crucial part, they are predictable. We consistently make errors in the same direction, which means if we can understand the underlying psychology,
we can design better systems to account for it.
Exactly.
I find the origin of this whole line of thinking so fascinating. It didn't start in some, high-tech behavioral lab with a multi-million-dollar grant.
Not at all.
It started with a really painful, intensely personal experience that led to this whole new understanding of human preference.
That's right. The whole realization of predictable irrationality, it often starts when you see that conventional wisdom, even from experts, can be profoundly wrong if you don't actually test it. The initial insight came from dealing with a severe burn injury. It involved long hospital stays and, the most agonizing part, the daily removal of bandages in a disinfectant bath. It was just an experience of pure, controlled daily pain.
And the nurses, who are the on-the-ground experts in pain management, they had their own theories, right, based on years of just doing the procedure.
They did. And they operated on two key but completely untested assumptions. First, they believed that if you have to inflict pain, it's better to just get it over with quickly. A vigorous, fast tug to rip the bandages off.
The Band-Aid approach.
The classic Band-Aid approach. It caused the sharp, high-intensity spike of pain, but it minimized the overall duration. They figured that stretching it out, even if the pain was lower moment to moment, would be worse for the patient.
That's an understandable intuition. I think most of us would probably guess the same thing. What was their second assumption?
They also assumed there was no psychological difference based on where they started. Whether they began removing the bandages on the most painful part of the body or the least painful part. They thought it was irrelevant to the overall suffering.
So pain was just math. Intensity times duration.
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
A simple aggregation. But the subsequent empirical tests, the actual data they collected on the pain experience, showed the complete opposite was true.
Really? How so?
The initial belief was just flat out wrong. The data showed that people experience significantly less pain overall if the procedure is done with a lower intensity over a longer duration.
So the slow pull was actually better.
The slow, steady pull was preferred and remembered as less painful than the quick, vigorous tug. And on top of that, starting with the least painful area and gradually building up was also much better.
So in essence, The experts, with all their best intentions and years of practice, were systematically doing the procedure in the most psychologically painful way possible.
Yes, all based on a faulty assumption about how we experience pain. And that's the power of this finding. It showed that if conventional wisdom about something as basic as pain can be so wrong.
Imagine how flawed our assumptions are about complex financial decisions.
Exactly. That moment, that realization was the spark for exploring all the other predictable ways we're irrational.
Let's apply that finding to the larger financial world then. I mean, we know that before the 2008 financial crisis, there was this almost religious belief that these little human irrationalities didn't matter at a macro level.
Right. The idea was that the market would just sort of correct for them.
Yeah, that market mechanisms in professional competition would filter out or neutralize the kinds of flaws we're talking about.
That was the core belief of the efficient market hypothesis crowd. They'd argue that even if one individual investor makes a mistake, the sophisticated institutions, the arbitrageurs, the sheer competitive pressure, it would all push prices back to their rational, objective value.
So they dismiss this whole field as just, studying small transactions or retail investor mistakes.
Pretty much. They'd argue that when the stakes are high, millions or billions of dollars on a trading floor, that pressure would force rationality.
And what's so incredible is that the high price we paid, the loss of homes, the global recession, the systemic failures, that was the ultimate proof that rationality is not guaranteed by high stakes.
That is the hard lesson of 2008. These systematic errors of judgment, like the herd behavior in buying subprime mortgages or the bias that assumed housing prices could never fall, when you aggregate them across millions of people,
They don't cancel out.
they compound. They create massive systemic instability. It's like an economic earthquake where the very foundation, the assumption of rational actors, was built on quicksand. The failure wasn't random. It was the predictable result of systematically miscalculating how people behave.
So if we aren't these perfect rational computing machines, what are we? And that brings us to the first major flaw we need to talk about, the truth about relativity. We just don't judge value in a vacuum.
Exactly. Humans rarely, if ever, evaluate anything, a product, a decision, an experience in absolute terms. We don't have some kind of internal absolute ruler for measuring value.
We just compare things.
We are wired to compare. We judge a wine not by its objective quality, but by how it tastes compared to the one we just had. We judge a salary by how it stacks up against the person in the cubicle next to us.
It's just like that visual illusion of the metal circle. The physical size of the circle never changes, but you put it next to a bunch of giant circles, and your brain sees it as tiny.
And then you put that same circle among tiny circles, and suddenly it looks massive. Our perception of reality is totally dictated by its immediate relative environment.
And this wiring is what makes us so vulnerable to comparison traps, especially in marketing.
Constantly. We're always looking for an easy reference point, and marketers leverage this all the time. This leads us right into something called the decoy effect.
Okay, let's unpack the decoy effect. It's a brilliant but kind of insidious marketing tool that's based entirely on this predictable irrationality.
It is. The decoy effect works because we tend to focus our decisions on comparing things that are easily comparable, and we often just discard options that are harder to evaluate. The classic example that's often used is from The Economist and their subscription offers.
Right. They presented 3 choices to customers.
Okay, so offer 1, an internet-only subscription for $59.
Offer 2, a print-only subscription for $125.
And offer 3, a print and internet subscription bundle for $125.
Wait, so look at that second option again. Print only for $125. Who in their right mind would choose that? If you're going to spend $125, why not get the bundle that has both?
Exactly. Logically, that print-only option is useless. It has zero value to a rational buyer.
But its presence is what makes the whole trick work. It's the decoy.
Precisely. If they had only offered the $59 internet option and the $125 bundle, a shopper might hesitate. They might lean toward the cheapest option. But by introducing that clearly inferior print-only option at the exact same high price,
It completely shifts the comparison.
the bundle suddenly doesn't look like an expensive choice anymore. It looks like an unbelievably superior, rational deal compared to the print-only choice. The decoy forces the comparison to happen locally between those two high-priced options.
And it pushes people away from the cheapest option and dramatically increases the number who pick the most profitable bundle.
And that is the definition of predictable irrationality. People willingly pay $66 more than they have to, just because the comparison was rigged. It's not that the buyers are unintelligent, it's that their brain is looking for the easiest path to making a decision.
And the decoy provides that path.
It provides the path.
We see this play out in huge financial decisions too, like buying a house.
Yeah.
A real estate agent who wants you to buy a specific house doesn't just show you that one house.
No, they introduce the decoy. So imagine you're shown 3 houses. First, a unique, beautiful, contemporary house. It's hard to compare to anything else. Then Colonial A, which is nice, but needs a very expensive new roof right away.
Okay.
And finally, Colonial B, which is perfect, move-in ready, and costs the same as Colonial A.
So if Colonial A didn't exist, you might spend weeks agonizing over the contemporary versus Colonial B. They're apples and oranges.
Right. But as soon as Colonial A, the decoy, is in the mix, Colonial B becomes the no-brainer. It is clearly superior to A, which is the same style and price, but needs a huge immediate investment.
So everyone picks Colonial B, and the contemporary house just gets pushed to the psychological sidelines. The decision is made on relativity, not on objective value.
Exactly.
This sounds like a useful mental shortcut, for simplifying complex choices. But you also point out that relativity has a really dark side when it comes to personal finance and just happiness. It fuels jealousy and envy.
Oh, it is deeply corrosive to our well-being. The same mechanism that helps us choose a house is the same one that ensures we are never satisfied with our income. We are hardwired to compare, and modern life, especially with social media, just puts that weakness on steroids.
Let's go back to that story of the high-earning employee who complained to the executive about his salary. He was making nearly $300,000, which is way more than he ever expected to make.
Objectively, he should have been thrilled. But he was miserable. Why? Because his happiness wasn't anchored to his absolute wealth or his own past success. It was anchored to the fact that his peer, who started at the same time and sat right across from him, had just gotten a promotion.
So his colleague was now making just a little bit more.
And that's all that mattered. He wasn't comparing his $300,000 to the national average or even his own goals from 5 years ago. He was comparing it locally to the guy next to him.
And this kind of relative thinking leads to some incredibly irrational financial behavior, like the $7 saving problem. Let's break down the logic flaw there.
Okay, so we have 2 scenarios. The goal in both is to save $7 by traveling for 15 minutes.
Right.
Scenario 1, you're buying a $10 pen. You find out you can get it 15 minutes away for $3. Most people say they would absolutely make that trip to save $7.
Ooh.
Scenario 2, you're buying a $455 suit. You find the exact same suit 15 minutes away for $448. Again, a $7 saving. Most people say they would not make that trip.
But rationally, the only thing that matters is whether 15 minutes of your time is worth $7. The price of the pen or the suit is totally irrelevant to the value of your time.
But we are not rational. We view the decision locally. Saving $7 on a $10 pen feels massive. It's a huge 70% discount. Saving $7 on a $455 suit feels like nothing. A tiny 1.5% discount.
So this tendency to judge savings relative to the purchase price leads to terrible financial habits.
Terrible. We waste so much energy chasing pennies on small items while being completely careless with thousands of dollars on big-ticket items.
It's the classic example of the person who spends hours clipping 25-cent coupons for groceries, but then when they're planning a $5,000 catered event, they casually add a $200 soup entree without even blinking.
Because the psychological pain of adding $200 is tiny relative to the $5,000 total. But the pain of not clipping that coupon feels huge relative to the small cost of the grocery item. This relativity just stops us from optimizing our overall financial health.
This is a perfect segue into our next section, arbitrary coherence and the power of anchors. If relativity tells us that we compare, anchoring dictates where those initial comparisons begin.
This is one of the most powerful and, frankly, most exploited concepts in all of behavioral economics. The first price you see, the initial anchor, establishes a long-term acceptance of value, even if that anchor was completely arbitrary.
And once that anchor is set, all future decisions just kind of cohere around it.
They do.
The story of the Tahitian black pearls and Salvador Sal, the Pearl King, is just the definitive example of this. It shows the deliberate, strategic use of anchoring to literally create value out of thin air.
This was back in the early 70s. A sale gets these striking gunmetal gray-black pearls. The problem was there was no market for them, zero demand, and therefore zero established value.
So he tried to sell them and just failed.
Failed miserably. Now, he could have panicked and discounted them heavily, maybe bundled them for cheap with traditional white pearls.
Which would have anchored their value at or near zero forever.
Exactly. But he resisted. He did something ingenious and completely irrational instead. He waited until he had the most exquisite pearls he could find. Then he took them to Harry Winston,
The most exclusive, legendary jeweler on Fifth Avenue.
the very same. He arranged for the black pearls to be displayed right in the window, set alongside the most expensive diamonds, rubies, and emeralds in the world. And crucially, he attached an outrageously high, completely arbitrary price tag to them.
And then he backed it up with a huge marketing campaign. Glossy, full-page ads in the most luxurious magazines, showing the black pearls draped next to these other high-end jewels.
He deliberately anchored them to the absolute peak of the luxury market. He arbitrarily defined their value as astronomical, and society, which has no internal price tag for luxury goods, just accepted that anchor.
And soon, black pearls became this lasting symbol of status and wealth, all because of that initial fabricated anchor.
It's just like biological imprinting, the way a gosling imprints on the first moving object it sees and thinks that's its mother. The human brain imprints on the first price it sees and uses that as the yardstick for future value.
That's the principle. Arbitrary coherence. The initial price is arbitrary, but once it's set, all subsequent prices have to make sense in relation to it.
We don't rationally evaluate every single decision from scratch. We just check if the new price is a reasonable distance from the anchor we already have in our head.
To really drive home how arbitrary that anchor can be, we have to talk about the experiment with the MIT MBA students and their Social Security numbers.
This was a brilliant experiment. You take these highly numerate, smart MBA students, and you hold an auction for things like bottles of wine and computer equipment. But first, you ask them to write down the last 2 digits of their Social Security number. Then you ask them a hypothetical question. Would you be willing to pay that number in dollars for the item? So, if your SSN ended in, say, 15, would you pay $15 for the wine?
And if it ended in 98, would you pay $98?
Right. Now, that number is obviously random, it's arbitrary, and it's completely meaningless to the value of the wine. Yet, when they were then asked for their actual maximum bid, the results were dramatic.
Let me guess. The people with the high SSN digits bid more.
Significantly more. Those who had high SSN digits as their initial anchor placed much, much higher bids than those who had low SSN digits. The random number unconsciously dictated their perceived market value.
They anchored themselves to a meaningless digit, and their actual financial decision cohered around it. It's incredible.
And this happens all the time in the real world, especially when it comes to things like our compensation and our perception of work.
Which brings us to the poetry reading experiment, where the same experience was arbitrarily defined as either a pleasure or a chore.
That's the perfect demonstration of how an anchor sets the entire tone. So students were split into 2 groups before listening to a poetry reading. Group 1 was anchored to the idea of paying $10 to listen.
Okay, so it's a desirable experience.
And Group 2 was anchored to the idea of being paid $10 to listen.
So it's a chore you have to endure.
Precisely. And when they were asked afterward to either bid or demand payment for more poetry readings of different lengths, the results followed that anchor perfectly.
So Group 1.
Group 1, anchored to paying, decided the experience was a pleasure, and subsequently bid positive amounts to attend all the readings.
In Group 2, who were paid, they saw it as work.
They had decided the experience was painful, and they demanded payment to attend more, increasing their price as the reading got longer.
The implication for things like salary negotiation is massive.
It is. If a company can set the anchor low for a new role, say $50,000, even if that price is arbitrary, future raises and subsequent job offers will often cohere around that initially low value. The first number you hear has a very, very long shadow.
This brings us to the next section, the magnetic pull of free E, the zero price effect. If we're this susceptible to comparisons and anchors, we are completely, paralyzed by the prospect of zero cost.
Zero is not just another price, it's an emotional trigger. I mean, standard economic models, they see the difference between 1 cent and 2 cents as the same as the difference between 25 and 26 cents.
A 1 cent difference.
Right. But the difference between 1 cent and zero is an emotional gulf that standard theory just doesn't account for. When something is free, we stop doing the cost-benefit analysis and we just focus on the emotional rush of getting something for nothing.
The Lindt truffle versus Hershey's Kiss experiment is the most stunning example of this.
It really is. So in the first setup, customers were offered a high-quality Lindt truffle for 26 cents and a standard Hershey's Kiss for 1 cent.
Okay.
The vast majority, 73%, chose the Lindt truffle. That's the rational choice. The perceived quality is worth the 25-cent premium.
But then came the key move. They discounted both prices by exactly 1 cent. The Lindt truffle dropped to 25 cents.
And the Hershey's Kiss dropped to free. Now, the relative price difference, 25 cents, is completely unchanged.
Logically, nothing should change.
Rationally, behavior should have stayed the same. But the response was immediate and overwhelming. Customers were blinded by the power of free. They flocked to the Kisses, abandoning the superior, higher-value truffle.
It's a purely emotional reaction. There's zero downside risk, no chance of making a bad purchase.
And that emotional surge leads us to make decisions that aren't in our best interest. They tested the same thing on kids at Halloween with Snickers bars.
So the kids were given 3 Hershey's Kisses to start. Then they were offered a choice.
Right. A small 1-ounce Snickers bar for free. They get to keep all their Kisses. Or a large 2-ounce Snickers bar in exchange for just one of their Kisses.
Okay, the rational analysis is clear. A 2-ounce Snickers for the price of 1 tiny Kiss is a fantastic deal. A huge net gain in chocolate.
But 70% of the kids were so fixated on the free option that they took the smaller Snickers, giving up the objectively better return on their investment.
They sacrificed half the product just to avoid paying a tiny fee. And this translates directly into poor financial habits for us as adults.
Oh, constantly. Think about financial services. So many people automatically choose a free checking account, even if a $5 a month account offers way better services like free online bill pay or better fraud protection.
That $5 cost feels like a loss, even if the free account ends up costing you more in hidden fees over time.
The immediate frictionless zero cost is just too powerful. It reminds me of the story of the person buying a car who chose one option based on a totally irrelevant free perk.
Oh, right.
Yeah, a buyer was torn between a practical minivan and a sporty Audi alternative. They chose the Audi, not because of performance or style, but because it came with free oil changes for 3 years.
And when you do the math,
A sober, rational look shows the total savings on those oil changes was maybe $150, less than 0.5% of the car's price.
but that feeling of getting something for nothing was so compelling, it completely overrode a rational decision on a purchase worth tens of thousands of dollars.
The conclusion is stark. When we're faced with 2 products, we consistently overreact to the free one, and it often leads to decisions that are not in our economic best interest.
Which moves us on to the next big challenge: self-control and procrastination. If we can't even handle a 1-cent transaction properly, how are we supposed to handle long-term financial discipline? This seems to be the root of low savings rates and high consumer debt.
It is. It's the constant war between our immediate impulsive self and our long-term rational self. The gratification of spending is right now, but the reward for saving is way off in the abstract future.
So our good intentions get derailed by impulse.
Constantly. To study this, they looked at college students facing paper deadlines. They split them into 3 classes, all of whom had 3 papers to write over the semester.
Okay, and each class had different deadline rules.
Exactly. Class 1 had dictatorial fixed deadlines imposed by the instructor, all equally spaced out. Class 2 had no deadlines at all, just a final deadline on the last day.
In class 3.
Class 3 got to choose their own 3 deadlines, but with penalties if they missed them.
The results here are a perfect illustration of our need for some kind of external structure.
Absolutely. Class 1, with the most restrictive, externally imposed structure, got the best grades.
And I'm guessing class 2, with total freedom, did the worst.
The worst, by far. They just succumbed to procrastination and crammed everything at the end.
But class 3 is the really interesting part, the self-imposed deadline group. They finished in the middle.
And that's the crucial finding. It shows that the students know they procrastinate. They know they benefit from pre-commitment. That's why they beat the no deadline group. But they don't fully understand the magnitude of their own weakness. They fail to set optimal boundaries for themselves. The key takeaway is that externally imposed restrictive deadlines are often better because we're just too lenient with ourselves.
This has massive implications for financial strategy and also for things like preventative healthcare, where procrastination can be a literal killer.
We see it all the time with necessary but unpleasant procedures. Colonoscopies, cholesterol checks. We all know the long-term benefits are huge, but the short-term inconvenience causes massive procrastination.
So we need mechanisms to enforce compliance. We need pre-commitment solutions.
One great example is using loss aversion. For a health appointment, you could implement a refundable $100 deposit that you only get back if you show up. That immediate short-term threat of losing $100 is more powerful than the vague, long-term threat of future health problems.
Another powerful technique is just simplification, like what Ford and Honda learned with car maintenance.
Historically, Ford had trouble with compliance because customers faced this overwhelming list of 18,000 different maintenance tasks at unpredictable intervals.
It was too complicated.
Too complicated, so it was easy to delay. Honda solved this by consolidating everything into 3 simple, easily scheduled service packages, like ordering a value meal instead of from a giant menu.
By making it predictable and simple, customers stop procrastinating.
And service revenue soared. The lesson is that complexity and short-term pain, no matter the long-term benefit, will always lead to procrastination.
Which brings us to a really fantastic behavioral solution for consumer debt, the self-control credit card.
This idea tackles the impulse spending problem head-on by providing that necessary external structure we were just talking about.
So how did it work?
The idea is that the credit card issuer would let you, while you're in your cold, rational planning state, pre-commit to strict spending limits. By category, by time frame, whatever you want.
So you could say only $20 a week on coffee or $600 every 6 months on clothes.
Exactly, and the card enforces it. If you try to exceed the limit, the card doesn't just send you a warning, it automatically applies penalties.
Like what?
It could either reject the transaction outright or maybe transfer a financial tax, a penalty amount to your savings account, or a charity you choose. It makes the impulsive spending immediately painful by attaching a real financial loss to it.
You'd think banking executives would love this idea. It could generate massive consumer loyalty.
You would think. But credit card companies profit enormously from debt and late fees. A card designed to help people spend less and manage their debt cuts right into their most profitable business. But it's a perfect example of a behavioral free lunch that uses our human flaws for a positive outcome.
Let's move on to the ownership trap and decision paralysis. Our personal relationship with our stuff fundamentally clouds our objectivity in financial transactions.
This is the endowment effect. The moment we own something, whether we bought it or it was just given to us, we immediately value it far more than the market does, and certainly more than people who don't own it.
We attach emotional value that just isn't transferable.
That's it.
The Duke basketball ticket experiment is the most powerful illustration of this.
It is. So students camped out for days to get into a lottery for tickets to a huge NCAA tournament game. The lottery then split them into 2 groups, the owners who got a ticket and the non-owners who didn't.
And the key is that both groups had put in the exact same amount of effort.
Right. Then researchers contacted both groups to find out what the ticket was worth, and the discrepancy was massive.
What did the non-owners say?
The non-owners, when asked what they were willing to pay for a ticket, averaged about $170. They were rationalizing it, thinking about what else that money could buy.
On the owners.
The owners were demanding an average price of $2,400 to sell the exact same ticket.
Wow. That's a staggering difference. How can the value of the same piece of paper shift by a factor of 14 just based on whether you possess it?
Ownership triggers 3 big irrational quirks. First, we fall in love with what we have. Second, and this is crucial, we focus overwhelmingly on what we might lose, the experience of the game, rather than what we would gain, the cash. Loss aversion is incredibly powerful.
And the third quirk is we just assume buyers see the same value we do.
Exactly. If you spend $50,000 on a personalized kitchen renovation, you are deeply in love with that kitchen, and you expect a buyer to see that $50,000 value too. But the buyer only sees the objective market cost. This bias makes it incredibly hard to sell assets at a rational price.
The ownership trap isn't the only thing that paralyzes us financially. We also have this irrational compulsion to keep all of our options open, even the worthless ones.
This was tested in the Door game, a computer simulation where you could earn money by clicking inside one of 3 colored rooms. The rational strategy is to find the highest paying room and just stay there.
But in the key version of the experiment, Any door that you didn't click on for a while would disappear forever.
Right. And this added the psychological pressure of loss. What happened was a frenzy. Highly intelligent participants raced between all three doors, wasting valuable clicks and therefore money, just to prevent the other doors from closing.
So they spent so much energy keeping their options liquid that they actually made about 15% less money than the people who just picked a room and committed.
The cost of indecision is often invisible but profound. We paralyze ourselves trying to choose between two similar options. Two cameras, two job offers. We waste so much time and energy trying to avoid the psychological pain of closing a door.
Let's pivot now to expectations, placebos, and trust. We've established our financial judgment is arbitrary, but our expectations can actually reshape our physical experience of the world.
Expectations are incredibly powerful. They're predictive mechanisms that filter and interpret all the sensory information coming into our brain. The MIT Brew experiment is a perfect example of how our brain creates reality based on what it anticipates.
That's the one with the beer laced with vinegar, right?
That's the one. The key variable was the timing of the reveal. When participants were told before they tasted it that the beer had vinegar in it, their expectation of unpleasantness was set, and they rated the beer poorly.
But if they were told after they had already tasted it,
Their expectations didn't have time to interfere. They rated that vinegar-laced beer just as highly as the regular beer. The information didn't alter the actual taste experience because the expectation wasn't there to shape it.
and this mechanism is tied directly to price through the placebo effect.
Right, because price is often a proxy for quality. A higher price sets a higher expectation of effectiveness, which can literally trigger a physiological response. This was shown dramatically in those pain shock experiments with a fake painkiller,
Velodone.
Participants were given electrical shocks while taking this pill, which was just a sugar pill. The only difference was the price they were told the pill cost.
And the results.
One group is told the pill cost $2.50 per dose. The other was told it was discounted to 10 cents. The high-price group got nearly total pain relief, a massive placebo effect.
And the 10-cent group.
The effect was cut in half. Only about half of those patients experienced relief. The cost of the pill itself drove the expectation, which then drove the actual pain relief.
This applies to consumer products too, not just medicine.
Definitely. Students who paid full price for an energy drink reported less fatigue and did better on cognitive puzzles than students who drank the exact same drink but thought they got it at a discount. The expectation of quality, generated by price, made the product actually work better.
Let's shift to the critical economic component of trust. We've talked about how irrationality can cause market failure, but the breakdown of trust, especially in financial systems, is driven by an equally predictable human response: revenge.
You can see this in an extension of the trust game. Player 1 trusts Player 2 with some money, hoping for a return. If Player 2 betrays that trust and keeps all the money, Player 1 gets an option.
They can pay money out of their own pocket to punish Player 2.
Exactly. Which, on a simple cost-benefit analysis, is completely irrational. It's a double loss.
So people do it.
The vast majority of people choose to punish. And what's fascinating is what brain scans showed. Seeking revenge actually activated the striatum, the brain's reward center. For the human mind, revenge is a form of pleasure.
So even though it costs us money, we gain a psychological satisfaction from seeing justice served.
And this seemingly irrational desire is actually a crucial enforcement mechanism for social cooperation. If people know you'll punish them, even at a personal cost, they're less likely to betray you in the first place.
This helps explain the profound, visceral rage the public had toward bankers after the 2008 crisis.
Absolutely. The public trusted these institutions with their savings, their retirement. When the system collapsed and those responsible walked away with huge bonuses and no accountability, it triggered this deep-seated desire for retribution.
It was more than just a liquidity crisis.
It was a crisis of trust violation. And addressing that predictable emotional response is essential for any real economic recovery.
Finally, let's talk about dishonesty, the distance from cash.
Yeah.
We're not talking about outright criminals here, but the common low-level dishonesty we see everywhere. The little transgressions from otherwise honest people who just fudge the numbers a bit.
Right. We all have this internal moral barometer that stops us from doing big things, like robbing a bank. But that mechanism seems to take a nap when it comes to the petty stuff. We want to benefit from cheating, but we also want to keep seeing ourselves as an honest person.
So there's a fudge factor. This was tested in experiments where students could cheat on a test and then pay themselves based on their score.
And the observation was consistent. Students cheated, but only a little bit. On average, they claimed about 3 or 4 more correct answers than the control group. Crucially, almost none of them claimed a perfect score, even though it would have meant more money.
They cheat enough to get a small benefit, but not so much that they damage their self-image.
But the most stunning finding was how easily this petty dishonesty was eliminated.
How?
When students, right before the chance to cheat, were asked to simply recall the 10 Commandments or just sign a brief, non-binding honor code statement, cheating ceased entirely.
Just a brief moral reminder at the point of temptation was enough.
It completely wiped it out. It suggests we just need to be reminded of our own ethical benchmarks at the moment we're tempted to cross the line.
The other key factor in dishonesty is the medium of exchange, cash versus non-monetary items.
The difference is exponential. Take the MIT dorm fridge test. Cans of Coke left in the communal fridge disappeared fast, but plates of dollar bills left right next to them remained completely untouched.
People would steal the item, but not the direct cash equivalent.
And in the cheating experiment, when participants were stealing non-monetary tokens, which they could immediately exchange for cash, they cheated more than double the amount compared to those who were stealing cash directly.
Cheating is just easier when it's one step removed from cold, hard cash.
It's easier for our rationalization to kick in. You can take a pencil from the office and call it a perk, but taking 10 cents from the petty cash box to buy that same pencil feels like theft. The abstraction of value allows for greater rationalization.
Which explains why so much financial dishonesty involves things like expense reports or accounting irregularities. The further you get from physical cash, the easier it is to bend the rules.
Exactly. It's much harder to get someone to see the moral implications when they're dealing with tokens or backdated stock options than when they're dealing with physical currency.
So that brings us to our final thoughts. The core conclusion here seems to be that we are just not the completely rational, autonomous actors that we like to think we are.
No. In many ways, we are pawns in a game driven by these systematic internal forces, relativity, anchoring, loss aversion, that we largely fail to comprehend. We operate under the delusion that we're objective masters of our own decisions.
But this isn't a completely depressing picture. The good news is that since our irrationality is systematic, we can design solutions. These behavioral free lunches can harness our flaws for massive benefit.
The most famous example is the Save More Tomorrow program. It's a brilliant solution that leverages our tendency to procrastinate against itself.
How does it work?
Employees agree today to automatically increase their retirement contributions, but the increase only kicks in when they get their future salary raises.
So because the pain of paying is tied to future hypothetical money, they don't feel that immediate loss that makes them resist.
It overcomes both the inertia of not saving and the pain of payment at the same time, and the results were revolutionary. Saving rates in those plans went from about 3.5% to upwards of 13.5%.
A massive positive shift, not by demanding more willpower, but by simply structuring the environment to accommodate our irrationality. So we'll leave you with this final provocative thought. Given that we systematically underpredict how powerful emotions and temptations will affect us, whether it's the impulse of a discount, the pain of selling something we own, or the urge to spend carelessly, where in your own financial life could you implement a pre-commitment mechanism or a behavioral boundary today?
Think about that internal struggle between your rational, long-term self and your impulsive, short-term self. What structure can you put in place today when you are calm and rational that protects your long-term wealth from your impulsive self tomorrow? That is the real challenge of mastering money and building wealth with purpose.
If you enjoyed today's discussion, be sure to subscribe our YouTube channel, social media accounts, and visit fatterwallets.com for more content, free courses, resources, and tools to help you live wisely and build wealth with purpose.